He's the U.S. brand ambassador for Jack Daniels. He's the founder of Dirty Sue. John Lennon kissed his mother. Tonight, he talks to photographer Alec Byrne and guest bartender Michael Neff. Your host, E.T., and this is Rock Tales.
Hey, my name is E.T., and this is Rock Tales. Music has been a part of my life since I was a kid. My parents basically bred me on music, rock and roll for my mom, Sinatra for my father. And now I work in the spirits business, and those worlds kind of collide on so many levels. So I really thought it'd be fun to meet some people in the music business, whether they're performers or photographers, producers, and hear the stories that kind of set that whole generation up for us to love for years and years to come. We're going to have, tonight we have a great photographer who literally spent his teenage years and early 20s shooting every single person in music that we revere today. And he's got great stories. But before I bring him on, I want to bring on producer Nate, who is going to be one of the cast of characters throughout the show to kind of help us along. Welcome.
Hey there. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, no one can see you right now. You're just like this voice from the heavens. But, pre-COVID, music's part of your deal too, right? Like this isn't your music is your life, right?
Yeah,
Not sitting here talking to my headphones.
No, podcasting is very much something I did part-time before COVID. And now that everyone's at home, staring at YouTube, trying to stay entertained, this is how, they say go to where the people are at, and the people are at So
now, look, this show is all about music, and you've seen a lot of shows. If you had to say, hands down, best live show I ever saw, what would it be?
Oh man, that's so hard because, I want to say, I was on Rock Legends Cruise last year. I was crew, and we saw like 30 amazing shows all in a row. And I want to say the most impressive thing I've seen in recent memory was Eric Gales on the Rock Legends Cruise. Eric Gales. And, we were sitting there with all sorts of rock royalty. I'm in a guitar heavy band. I hear so much rock guitar. It's really hard to break my threshold of wow. And everything he did just had me on the verge of tears. He was unbelievable. And like I said, there's not a more cynical group of guys than the front of house sound guy, the production man. They have to sit through every set. I was not sitting through that set. I was on my feet at attention. So
that's amazing. Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's a really unfair question to ask you, but I'll probably ask you again anyway. I feel like it's almost moments versus shows.
Yeah.
I can feel like I saw this here and that was incredible. But also this here was incredible. So it isn't always the entire show or the entire festival. It could be just moments, like turning around and seeing a whole sea of people singing along with Bruce Springsteen or something like that, where it's just something that ingrains in your head forever.
Oh man. I mean, I just think back to my earlier years of going to festivals and when that was still a really novel thing. And, I went to Memphis in May one year and got to see Al Green, the Barkays, the Roots, all within like literally 2 hours. And I was 19. I got kicked out of the festival. I snuck back in. I was dancing all night. Sometimes the show is amazing, but the culture of the particular event is just as amazing. And I have a newfound appreciation for that now that I'm actually really working in production, because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes of those great moments,
Right.
People like you are involved in that in a big way, because the vision of whoever's sponsoring it really goes a long way to making things actually cool,
Yeah, no, I agree. I've seen glimpses of behind the scenes, and people don't know what like hanging on a thread to get the show going or not going. And that's why I'm excited to bring Alec on, because he was there for so much of this history. And he, I've read so much about him and I've talked to him, and he has such great stories about, even like Isle of Wight, where so much issue with this thing and it almost didn't happen, but it did happen, and we only saw I didn't see Isle of Wight except for video, but we never saw the, oh my God, we're not going to go on. And then they're on. And the audience is just like cheering and, their heroes are on stage. But that last second before, they hit the stage was terror backstage.
Oh man! And back in the day, with the stuff that Alec was there for, I mean, if you go to his website, the Alec Byrne Archive, there's a list of all the artists that he has photographed and published. And man, it's one of those lists where it's just like, name any artist you care about.
Right.
It's probably on this list. And
yeah,
it's the first generation of rock and roll, really. I mean, this is the canon. This is when, in 1,000 years, when you're in rock history class at space high school, they're going to be talking about these guys still, because it's the first generation of rock and roll, of American music, of recorded music. And it really is novel in a way that a lot of artists today, even though they're talented and amazing, this is history in a way that isn't.
No, it was the beginning. It was a shift from, a certain style of music where the kids said, this is what we like now. And the artist said, this is what we're doing now. And it all just kind of changed. And I guess the next thing was punk, right? And the next thing was hip hop, and the next thing was, K-pop. There's these movements, but to me, that one really, for what I put on, Spotify now, that era speaks to me so well, and to have someone that was there for all of it, is incredible. So I'm really looking forward to his stories. So I say we bring him on. What do you think?
Let's do it.
All right. Alec, welcome to the show. It's good to see you again.
Great. Thank you, E.T. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I met you through our wives. They worked together, and I think your wife invited my wife to your book launch in Santa Monica. And before COVID, my wife we would trade off for secret dates. And the secret date was a trip to Santa Monica, and then we got to the shop, and it was your book launch. And of course, it was, one of the best secret dates, if not the best she ever took me on. There's so many images that were amazing to see. And, but, look, since then I've done a little deeper dive on you and found out some stuff. You kind of fell into photography by accident. It wasn't like you went to school for photography and that was your major and you were destined to be a photographer. It kind of was almost, I don't want to say handed to you because you worked really hard, but it just kind of fell into you.
It was. There was no art school. There was no college. There was never a single lesson in photography. I basically was. I answered a job advertisement. I was 16 years old, and this job was as a dispatch rider for a Fleet Street news agency, and it sounded like kind of fun. You were whizzing around London. You'd race to meet photographers, if it was Downing Street or Wimbledon or something. You collect their film, race it back to the office. It'd be processed, and then the images would be taken around to newspapers. So I would hang out with the darkroom guys. Got my first camera. Went into the darkroom and saw that print come up in the dish, and I was hooked. So,
what was the first photo you took? Do you remember?
Oh God! I mean, it was just the cat, the park, trees. It was nonsense. So, but seeing that come up in the dish was just a magical. It's like, oh God, I got to do another one, and then it basically became an obsession. You'd find yourself, years later even, I was in the pub with friends, and you'd be looking at someone and the window light would come in, and I'd be evaluating 60th of a second at 2.8 with Tri-X, just wouldn't even be aware of it. So then I was very into music. Really like going to clubs. London was alive during that time. So So now my interest in music and started to take pictures. So I took the camera to the clubs and concerts and started shooting some of the bands. And then I would, we had like about 4 weekly music papers in the UK. So I would send the pictures off and see if anyone was interested. And this was like just before this happened, with my obsession. A building went up across the street where I was living, and I had this unusual concrete canopy on the building. So I took a picture of it, sent it into the local newspaper. They published it. So I still remember that envelope when it arrived, and I take out this check for 1 guinea, and it was like, wow, I'm getting paid.
Now, what does 1 guinea equate to?
About $1.50.
Not bad. Hey, this is the mid-'60s, right? Or late 60s?
Yeah, mid-'60s. And so it was just like, okay, this is fantastic. So send the pictures into the music papers. And I forget which one the Animals, Eric Burdon and the Animals was the first one I got published. I think it was in Melody Maker. And so I just kept sending in the pictures, and then I got to a point where this dispatch rider job was paying 5 guineas a week. So after getting a few publications, it equaled out. So it was kind of like a no-brainer to like, hey, let's quit the day gig and go shoot rock and roll.
Now, look, definitely want to get to your pictures, but, you were in probably the greatest music scene that ever existed. London in the mid to late 60s, before everyone came to America, that was it, man. That was the swinging London 60s.
It was the epicenter of the music world, perhaps followed by San Francisco at the time, maybe New York. But no question, London was the place to be.
You were, what, 17, 18 at this point?
17 when I first started shooting. And some of those early pictures, I managed to get a letter from NME. One of the music papers was New Musical Express. And after me bombarding them with pictures, I said, look, I need a letter to get into some of these other gigs. And they said, well, okay, we'll give you a letter, but we're not giving you a job. So with that letter, it meant that I could get into other venues apart from a few local joints.
So this is like, dear XYZ manager, let this kid in? Like he's with us?
Yes, it was just part bullshit that I would just say, I'm with, and you carried off the attitude. It seemed to work. And I got backstage with Spencer Davis Group, which was the first one that I shot. And if you look at those pictures, it was after the gig and everyone's hyped up, and Stevie Winwood and Spencer and everyone else. And I didn't have the balls to say, guys, I need a group shot. I didn't want to interrupt anything. So I'm just sort of hiding, and not hiding, but just way back, just taking sort of single headshots of everyone. And you can really tell by looking back at that first kind of shoot, just a young kid, and how you managed to, and maybe because you were a young kid, you weren't a threat. You didn't, what can he do,
Right. What was your acceptance level? I was going to add, like, you're backstage at, some of the coolest bands ever, taking pictures. You're a teenager. Like, what was your access? Was it just fly on the wall taking pictures, or did you start befriending some people and go to the parties and all that good stuff?
Well, you had to be successful. And there's no way you can be a fly in the wall in the dressing room, because everyone is very aware. They're hyped up. but they're very aware of anyone who comes within their domain. So you had to really get on, and you couldn't go in there and start dominating. Oh, guys, I need a group shot. Okay, these guys are so wound up. So you really had to, be respectful, bit of psychology, blend in, and have a bit of a joke with the guys, so you get accepted. And when you see these bands week after week, you get more accepted. So, again, I think, and just being such a young kid, I wouldn't take no for an answer. So it was just kind of like, it didn't really matter that, if someone said, some bouncer or somebody said, oh, no, you can't come in, whatever. You just tried it again.
Right.
But because of this young sort of being a young kid, that sort of leads me up to one of my fun shots, and about the only picture I can remember by date, and that was like, because you asked how old, and that was May the 4th, 1967, and it was my birthday on May 3rd. So I remember the day after, because I just turned 18, and that was Mick Jagger and Jimi Hendrix together. So
Amazing.
Literally, 17, just turned 18. So
How did that come about? How did you find?
Well, if you look at the picture, it was a TV show, Top of the Pops, which was the most influential. There you go. The most influential TV show in the music world, in the UK especially. Every single artist you could think of, Beatles, Stones, Doors, Dylan, everyone has done Top of the Pops. And it's pretty amazing that I had access to this show every week. Every Thursday at 3 o'clock, I'd be at Lime Grove Studios in West London. And this particular, sometimes I was shooting so much that I couldn't even go. And this particular one, I found out Jimmy was going to be there. So I went along, and as I'm shooting him on stage, the TV studio, the stage is all lit. So everything around the stage is kind of dark. And I'm shooting, and I'm looking over there thinking, that looks a lot like. And I couldn't really make out who it was. And then Jimmy finished, the lights came up a little bit, and he walked over, and I thought, oh, that's Jagger. So I walked straight over immediately and said, guys, I need a picture. And it was like, Jimmy, would you mind, Mick, could you? And if you look at that picture, you'll see they're almost rubbing shoulders, which is a bit unnatural for these two rock icons to be pushed together. But the studio is so fucking dark that I couldn't really get, they had to be as close together as possible to make it work. And I took one frame, and that was it.
No way, that's the only picture you took?
Single frame, 2 1/4 Rolleiflex. So you had to look down at this camera, crank on the film. But that's all it is just one frame.
That's crazy, because nowadays, right, everyone digital, you can take 1,000 frames, pick the one you like. Yeah. And you had to rely on, you could have got back to your dark room and realized your finger was in front of the lens or whatever. Lighting was bad.
It was dark. You had to manually focus. And very often you get back into the dark room and you think, oh, crap. The light was bad, or you back focused, or there was something, and you never knew until you saw the film.
That's really, I guess at some point that for you you knew you took one shot. There's got to be a little bit of anxious in your stomach when you're, praying that photo came out.
Oh yeah. Especially as it turns out that this is the first time Mick and Jimmy has been photographed. And
Wow.
this is, we researched this to see, was there an earlier shot? And there's never been an earlier picture. So, and over the years, when I see it, I have breakfast with Mick and Jimmy every morning. And I still look at that print. And you can still see something like the beading in the jacket or whatever it is. There's something that catches my eye 50 years later.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it really was. But it's all down to really Top of the Pops. Everyone
And you,
appeared.
man.
Well, it was just what a lucky break. What a lucky break. And
for us too, though.
They weren't there. Jagger wasn't there because they were on the show. Jagger was there checking out Jimmy, as everyone did in London. When Jimmy would hit London, boy, so many clubs I were in that Clapton would show up. When he played the Savile Theatre, the Beatles showed up. And they were sitting up in a box. Everyone came to pay homage to Jimmy.
Right.
Just an amazing character. And I photographed him probably, I don't know, a dozen times. And when you meet the guy, it's kind of like this stage persona, this wild man, You meet him and he's the most polite, soft-spoken, and with me, he's just so cooperative. Everyone you're always trying to get the heads together. So we'd be in dressing rooms in Liverpool or somewhere, and I just photographed them the week before and go backstage and it's like, guys, the routine. Can we get Mitch? And so
now when you saw him the first time, when he came over to London, you'd seen a lot of other bands and you'd seen a lot of other great musicians. Was there really something like, holy shit, that's Jimi Hendrix? There's something, that's not the same as everybody else I've seen.
There are probably half a dozen people that had that impact when you're a photographer and you're in the pit and you're shooting and this wall of sound is just coming over you. And you kind of look at the other shooters there, and we go to gigs 3-4 times a week. So, every single weekend almost, my life was dominated by going to some venue, at the weekend, and maybe 2 or 3 gigs during the week. So when you look at other people and you think, whoa, you're listening to something really special.
Right.
He was one of them.
That's amazing that you got to experience that multiple times.
Yeah, he was really one of them.
Now, all these pictures that you took, there was, if I remember, I know you've told the story, but there was a couple times, didn't you almost lose every photo you've ever taken? Not just one time?
How this collection is here to be shared is a bit of a story. In 1972, I was out Christmas shopping on King's Road. I remember it vividly. And I called into the studio. No cell phones in those days. She went to a payphone. I called in. I spoke to my secretary, Angie, and I said, hey, just checking in, And I could hear all this noise going on. And a male voice came on. I said, who's this? He said, it's a fireman, mate. We're just putting out a fire. And I went, what? I raced back to the studio and pretty much half the building was gone. Thousands of negatives were destroyed. It was gut-wrenching. And what I could save, I did, and I still have today. I still have smoke damage negatives, water damage negatives. Who knows, one day there might be some way to restore or whatever. But then in 1975, I basically quit the music biz, left London, moved to Hollywood to shoot movie and TV people, and shipped everything over. On the crossing on the steamship, the container, there was storm damage. Water got into the container. I probably lost hundreds of negatives, not thousands, hundreds. So then I had an office on Hollywood Boulevard. And in 94, the earthquake hit. So you can see, this is the building next to mine. So,
okay, so you're not where the wall's falling off, you're the next building over with the black fire escape?
No. Yeah, one over. We didn't suffer this amount of damage. And I didn't really lose a great amount of negatives. Everything was turned upside down, filing cabinets on the floor and everything else. But how this archive is still around through fire, flood, and quake. So,
that's pretty incredible.
Let's hope we survive COVID.
Yeah, right, for sure. So far, I haven't seen a picture get infected, so hopefully we'll be good.
Yeah. What could happen?
Right.
What else could?
So you've there's other pictures of Mick that you've taken, right? That Hendrix and Mick, you've taken tons of Jagger and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. There was when you were in the music business, there was like key people that you had to be aware what they were doing, where they were, so anything that came up, you had to make sure. I was covering, I started out working for NME, but then very quickly left and formed my own studio. So I was working for music papers around the world, Music Life in Japan, Pop in Switzerland, Music Express in Holland, Bravo in Germany. It was global. So if anything was happening with the Beatles, Stones, Floyd, Zeppelin, Marley, whatever the key names were, you had to make sure you were there. You got them.
Right.
So when the news came out that Jagger was going to make his film debut, I'm on the phone saying, I've got to be there. I said, no way. This is a closed set, going to be no media allowed. I called everyone I could possibly think of and badgered and whatever. And eventually I got the phone call. You're going to be allowed one day on the set. And it's a location. They're shooting at a residence in Knightsbridge. It was like, okay, it turns out I've only seen 4 other photographers work from this movie. And it was a pretty controversial performance. It was directed by Nicholas Roeg. And it was a lot of handheld cameras, shot in 35 millimeter film. So when I arrived at the location, there was all grips and lighting guys and people coming and going. And the guy said, yeah, they're on the second floor. So I'm walking up the stairwell and wardrobe people are pushing by and very tight sort of thing. And I get on the second floor. I open the door and there's Mick in bed with 2 naked women. I'm thinking, okay. This is something I have to stick around for. So in this confined space, I look over and I see a corner of the room and I think, okay. As I sort of try and head for that corner, there's sound guys and everything, and I kind of have to scooch by the end of the bed. And as I sit on the end of the bed and I sort of look over, and Jagger is kind of glaring at me as if I'm trying to move in on his threesome. But anyway, I got to the corner of the room and I just wanted to disappear into the wallpaper and stay as long as I could. And got some amazing stuff of Jagger with Anita Pallenberg. And we find out later that Keith, who was dating Anita, is outside the location in his car, fuming, pissed as all hell, refusing to come in.
God.
The movie itself was Warner Brothers thought they were getting the Rolling Stone version of A Hard Day's Night.
Right.
This
And they did
sing-along.
not.
Oh no. This was like graphic violence, drugs, sex. The stories are that when the wives of Warner Brothers executives were at screenings in Burbank for this movie, they left.
Oh,
And the
man.
movie was bad. The movie never came out for, I think, maybe a decade or something afterwards. So pretty controversial. But
That's crazy.
what a privilege to be able to get on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's like, I know when you were saying when you were a kid, like to be there, but you also captured time for everybody. You captured moments of history that, like I wasn't at Isle of Wight, I wasn't at the Marquee, I wasn't at any of these places, and you and other photographers like you caught all these moments for people that are fans and love the genre and that whole era. And without you, it's just stories being told and passed down, but you actually captured moments. And that to me is such a gift that you have, that you're able to do that. And, like when you caught Jimmy and Mick, you just happened to get lucky and get into that thing or force your way in. But there's a picture that will never go away, that's forever, that you brought 50 years later. Like you say, you're getting that experience for yourself. I can't imagine what the rest of the world gets from that same picture.
It was such really a special time. You've heard that so often, but it truly was. And all of these images, my archive just went into boxes in the garage and stayed there for 40 years until somebody, Drew Evans, great guy, said, what are you doing with these things? These should be out. You should be sharing these, And to be honest, I didn't really quite understand, would there really be such a lot of interest in it? And he put together this show in Culver City in Smashbox Studios one rainy December night. It was a turning point in my life. And I forget the year now. It's about 5 years ago. So we put this show on. First time they were ever seen, someone that had never been seen before. And I certainly had never seen anything printed up this big. When I was doing it, it was like 8x10 prints to magazines and to record companies and stuff like this. So we printed these beautiful prints. 1,000 people showed up for a one-night show. I was just, by the end of the evening, I'd lost my voice because I was talking so much. And to me, people coming up saying, "Oh, those pictures of Led Zeppelin, I was at that gig in Newcastle."
Oh, wow.
And they wanted to share stories, and it was such a moving experience. And that was a big turning point. And that's what really made me realize that they ain't making these pictures anymore. No. This was a special time that's never going to come back. I just don't see this type of following with K-pop or whatever the
whole, I think it was
today.
Yeah, I think the closest we ever came to was more of maybe country or hip hop had their moments of birth. That, I mean, country's been around forever, but I think it's hit a bigger audience. But that scene, the way of the world, the times, and all that talent. I mean, I saw a picture. You had a young Bowie also, like before Bowie was Bowie, right?
Yes. Yeah. What a great experience that was. I got the phone call that I could go to his home and shoot. And I said, why don't we do it in the park? He was living at his manager's house in London, in Manchester Street. And there was a park close by. And we agreed, whatever it was, I think at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday or something. And I get to the park and he's at the gate. There's no publicist, managers, hair, makeup, all this bullshit that you need nowadays when you're doing anything. Just David. So we go in, and I knew kind of early on that you don't just take the camera out and start bombarding someone. So we walked around the park for a while and chatted away, and we definitely clicked. We were both South London boys. He was born in Brixton. I was living in Brixton. And I didn't know what it was, but we had a certain rapport. And what was going to be an hour shoot turned into most of the day. Really easygoing guy. And I was really thinking he was running an arts center in Beckenham. And I really thought he's going to be artsy, edgy, moody, uncooperative, the opposite. So we had a great time in the park. And certain shoots like this one, when you're doing it, you've got something. Unlike Mick and Jimmy, which you just keep your fingers crossed. This one, I knew I'd got something. And about 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from his office saying, "Oh, David would like to use this picture. He's going on his first tour with Humble Pie, support act he was for Humble Pie, and he'd like to use this in the program, in the tour guide." I was like, "Sure, no problem." So now go forward almost 50 years, and the last project David supervised before he died was a CD compilation called 5 Years.
Okay.
And with that compilation was a book. And the lead picture in that book is that one.
Oh my God. And
Didn't get it from me.
Didn't get it from you?
Nope. He saved it from back in the day. And this guy, when you think it's been photographed 1,000 times, maybe, he saved this picture from this shoot and decided to use it in what turned out to be his last project. When his people found us, they said, "My God, we've been searching everywhere to try and get clearance for this picture. What can we do?" So, but it actually came from his personal collection. And then when we found out he died, it was like, oh God, it was, I was really touched.
Yeah, I can't imagine you not being. I mean, that to take a cool picture is great. And to know that David Bowie saved that picture for 50 years, that's got to be like, I have to, like you said, he's been photographed 1,000 to 10,000 times, who knows, right? And then all the things he's picked up along the way and all the changes that he's gone through as an artist, probably as a human, from single to married to this to that to different genres of his own world. And that made every move, that made every single. That's awesome. Good for you.
When that came out, I was like, oh my God. And more so because normally you get a request from someone clearing these pictures to say, we'd like to use this and so on. The way we did in, let me do an unashamed plug.
Please.
This book, that picture is in this book. And you normally get the request in.
Right.
It didn't happen with this one. So when we found out, when we said, well, where did it come from? Where did you? And they said, no, it was in David's personal collection. So that was really, I don't know, to me, I was very, very touched.
I bet. I mean, and that book is out now, the Bowie Icon.
Yes. There's some great pictures in here with some great photographers. Terry O'Neill, there's a whole bunch of Greg Gorman, there's a whole bunch of great photographers, and of course, yours truly.
Right. I read something about that book this week, and I haven't seen a hard copy yet, but I'm excited to. Now, speaking of living legends, or not living legends, but legends of all time, you know, a lot of the guys that you photographed, because you were based in London, either were based in London or came through London. And then there was, I saw you took a picture or multiple pictures of Bob Marley, which I'd never really heard anyone that met the guy. Like, you have the mystique of Bob Marley, but I've never really listened to anyone tell me they met Bob Marley. So I'm curious what Bob Marley was like.
I was a big fan. I loved his music. So I was a big fan. It was a real honor to meet the guy. And he was staying at the Montcalm Hotel in Bayswater. And I wanted to try and get a shoot in my studio, but they wouldn't go for it. Time was limited. So they said, well, why not? He's staying at this hotel. Go along and spend an afternoon with him. So I didn't want to bring any, it was a hotel room, so I didn't want to bring a whole bunch of people. So I'm schlepping my camera gear, lights, tripod, stuff. And I get to the hotel and come up in the elevator, and I'm sort of looking for the door's open, and I'm looking for his room number. And it was like, oh, shit, you know. And then it was like... You could just, the smell was so strong. So I just followed the smell to his room. Knock on the door. Bob opens up. Hey, man, you know, have some herb. And he hands me this joint and this blue cloud in the room. Nowadays, that's no big deal.
Right.
Back then, Jagger and Richards were taken to Brixton jail. It was completely illegal to be smoking weed. And we were in this nice upscale hotel, you know, and the whole floor is reeking of weed. So it was pretty ballsy. But what a great guy. What a great guy. I mean, that was the only time I photographed him on stage, but that was the only time that we really went face to face. And it's hard to know. I'm assuming he's stoned. He was stoned most of the time, right?
Right.
So
it seemed like it.
Very mellow, as you would expect, but enjoying London. So we swapped a few stories there. He very much wanted to go to a pub, and which that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
Too well known. But just the fact that he was so free and easy, that he was smelling the house down with weed.
Yeah. First of all, you met Bob Marley. Second of all, you got high with Bob Marley. So, I mean, that's, you know, a pretty epic tale. That begs the question: have you ever met Willie Nelson?
No, I haven't. And I've got to say, in case my daughter watches this podcast, when the book was released in London, we were over there, and my daughter was in New York, calls up and said, "You never told me you got high with Bob Marley." She was outraged because I didn't talk about getting high with your kids, but. Right. So yeah, it was a fun thing, but no, Willie Nelson, no. But I can imagine what the experience would be like.
I mean, I don't know, man. That's crazy. Bob Marley is, you know, all these years later, he's still, you know, Jim Morrison style, different vibe, but in the vein of there's such a mystique still about Bob Marley and his whole, you know, what he put out in the world and what seemingly, because obviously I never met him, but great guy, great message, great music. And, you know, for you to have met him and hung out in his hotel room, you know, is epic enough. And then just have that one more story to tell, even more epic.
It was. It really was. And he was such a, and something about, I mean, I guess, I honestly don't remember people getting, like the whole audience getting stoned. You could smell weed at his gigs, not like nowadays. But there were always, you always met happy people, which, you know, you wouldn't necessarily get that vibe late in the later days with the Who, you know, who are all people amped up and, you know, just a different vibe.
Right.
I loved his music and loved the guy.
That's great. That's great. That's good to hear. Cause you know, look, you've met them all. So somewhere along the way, there's going to be someone that maybe you're like slightly disappointed, but you know, you're meeting maybe some of your idols, definitely other people's idols, you know, so there's always that chance of disappointment. So it's good to hear that someone that you really think is a good guy turned out to be a good guy.
And quite often when you're in the business, you form a relationship with their managers. And if you connect with the manager, the door is opened to the artist. But likewise, if you don't connect, and I had very limited access to Led Zeppelin. Their manager was a really difficult guy, really. That's putting it really politely. But Peter Grant didn't get on with a lot of people. So I never really got great access to Zeppelin, you know, and other people like the Bee Gees, just anything I wanted, whenever I wanted, in the studio, in their homes, you know, so certain people, it's dictated by your connections with management.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Look, I'm Zeppelin obsessed, and I've read the stories, and Peter Grant definitely, you know, even in that little clip on Song Remains the Same, you can tell that if it didn't go Peter Grant's way, it didn't go anybody's way. So that's not a shocker to hear. You know, look, Zeppelin is an obsession of mine, but it came out of my being basically born on the Beatles, you know, from my parents' generation. And I've seen some of your pictures. You know, just to say that you were with the Beatles ever is, it's crazy. I mean, it's the Beatles. And you were there with them more than once taking pictures, which, you know, it's the Beatles, and to this day, it's still the Beatles.
It is, and they just, their stature just continues to, you know, it's getting up there at Beethoven level. You know, they're beyond iconic. There was one particular shoot with them towards the end of them performing as a you know, a group. And that was at Abbey Road, where they recorded all their great classic albums. And they were doing this telecast, which nowadays means nothing. But this was going to be broadcast. I'm trying to think now how many countries, I forget how many countries, but it was going to be 700 million people were expected to watch this thing around the globe. And it was in June 1967. And there was a lot of media there. So it wasn't just me, as much as I'd like to say that. But it was, they were so, I don't know, I never connected that closely with George. But McCartney, I did a lot of stuff with. Lennon, I did a few things with. Ringo did a few. George was very quiet, almost shy type person. But McCartney, I went on to do his autobiographical TV series, a number of different projects with Paul. But the Abbey Road thing was so much fun too. I mean, the whole, oh, there you go. The whole street was closed down with screaming kids. You couldn't even, there's no traffic allowed anywhere near the studio. And they didn't allow any media in for the actual taping. They allowed us in for the rehearsal. and then they blocked everything off for the actual taping itself. But what a thrill that was!
Were they playing, or was it recorded? Were they actually playing live for the rehearsal?
For the rehearsal, they were playing, yeah, but you couldn't get in to the actual Studio One, I think it was, where they were rehearsing. So they came out into like a media area. And then we took them outside, everyone was pushing together, we want more, we want more. So you didn't see them. Otherwise, I would have shot pictures of them playing.
Right.
But it was such a crush of people, and it was going to be broadcast around the world. So media from all over the world was there.
That is, I mean, I don't even, I live in LA, you see people, it's not that big of a deal, but then there's there's other people, right? Like it's a big deal to anybody. And the Beatles, all four of them. I mean, I saw the Who a couple years ago, and Ringo's son is their drummer now. And
yes. Yeah.
Roger Daltrey was talking about the gig and whatever, and introducing the band, and he introduces Ringo's son, and he's like, we have a special, thing to say tonight. His dad's in the audience. There's 20-some thousand people there. Just knowing that Ringo Starr was in that room somewhere, it gave me the chills all these years later, because it's still a Beatle, And I can't even imagine like your access and what you experienced.
During that period, I have to say, we really didn't have any concept of how important this was going to be. I was running around. I mean, when you look at my diary, Southampton on Wednesday with the Who, Led Zeppelin on Thursday, the Stones in Hyde Park on Friday. I mean, it just went on, one major event after another. And it haunts me now, because occasionally some of these resurface. But I used to send original slides, transparencies, out to record companies and magazines and stuff like that, with a cover note saying, when you're finished, please return these. Right. Which, of course, most of them didn't. But I couldn't be bothered to follow them up, because I'm doing the Stones next week, and I'm doing them 2 weeks later. And I'm doing the Who 3 weeks from now, and Floyd on Tuesday. So you had real no concept of stopping and taking it all in, and it was never going to end.
Right.
So, but that kicks me when I think of how cavalier I was with sending original, with negatives, you do a print and you retain the neg. With color slides. So,
look, I mean, it's a different world now. People don't even think about that, because it's everywhere. It's on your phone, it's on the cloud, it's in your computer, it's it's in your email. So God forbid you lose something, you can pretty much find it.
Exactly. With digital, you're getting the exact same copy time after time. With analog, unfortunately, that's not quite the same.
No. Now, true or false, a little birdie told me that in 1 week, you saw 3 Stone show and 2 Zeppelin show all in the same week.
Yes, one of those wasn't open to the public.
Okay.
And that was the Stones at the Marquee. But it was, when I think back of how I used to shoot in those days, when I look at the diary and I see stuff, it's like, how did I do that? Because I'll be doing a gig and finish at 1 a.m. and I'd go back to the studio and I'd rush some prints out, and then the next day I'd be at a record company reception. It wears me out reading the stuff now. I couldn't even have a concept of how to do that. But that particular week involved, I got a phone call that the Stones were going to do invitation only concert, not open to the public, special invited audience. at the Marquee Club. And it was going to be televised. So I got the call and I went down there, and there was one other photographer there, and we thought, do you think they're gonna show up? You know, it's just a small little venue and so on. So, and at this time I think they were about to leave and go into exile in France. So we weren't too sure they're actually going to appear. But sure enough, and the Marquee Club, I'm sure you've seen so many concerts at this place. It's only about capacity 400, maybe 500 people. Wow. It's a real small venue, jam-packed normally, you know, with people. And the stage is about 3 foot, maybe 3 foot high. So sure enough, they show up. And I'm 10 feet away, you know. Mick is kind of spitting on me almost when he's shouting into the mic. That was quite an experience, and some of the best pictures came out of that. Especially the lighting was absolute shit, and that to me was a bit of a downer. You know, why this? Because it was going to be taped. Why they were using such crap setup, I have no idea. But maybe it was some director who wanted to be moody or something. But it turns out that I got some of the best things ever, some of the best images ever, especially of Jagger. Some of my favorites of Jagger. And I've done dozens of Stone concerts from that evening. And I don't know, maybe halfway through this gig, I start noticing that the guys, and I never saw this at the time when I processed the film, I very quickly went through, picked out the selects, the major images, that one's good, and didn't really closely look at them until later when I was getting ready to do the book. And I started looking at the sequence of pictures where you see the guys in the band are sort of looking over at Keith, who is playing something that's nothing to do with what they're playing. And he's weaving around a bit. And some of these pictures I have now, when I look at them, you see the guys are all looking and laughing. And the next thing, Keith falls back, hits the amplifier, slumps to the floor, which I think you got that one.
Oh my God.
I don't know at that time, supposedly the stories, he was doing a lot of heroin. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it, but the guy passed out. And I look over at the other photo there, and is he dead? What happened? He wasn't, obviously. So whatever they gave him, he managed to come back and complete. But that was their farewell. That was meant to advertise their farewell tour. They were going to leave. That was the last gig in a nationwide UK tour, and they were going to go into exile in France, where they recorded that famous album.
Right. So let me just get this straight. He passes out, and then somehow whatever smelling salt thing they gave him, he gets back up and finishes the show.
I didn't see what they gave him, whether it was anything intravenous or smelling salts or whatever it was. But I did see a lot of bottles of beer and Jack Daniels on all the amplifiers, which I think are in my pictures. So they were pretty well lubricated, all of them. But when you see the power of what they do on stage, and you see Charlie Watts sitting there pumping out this stuff, and his expression is just like he's on a train going to work or something. It's emotionless. And yet he's driving this. Yes. When you're in a small venue, I can remember what Jerry Hall said. she's seen the Stones in mega stadiums from South America to, you know, Africa, you name it. Some of the fondest memories she has of seeing the Stones are in small, intimate clubs, which you kind of would expect.
Yeah.
10 feet away from Mick was something that never happened again. And it's just a memory that, to me, I still cherish.
Yeah, that's, you know, I have maybe on one hand the experience of seeing something magical like that, and you know, you seem to have a decade of magic. I think you've done in 1 week what I've done my whole life, but I do agree. You know, when you capture a moment in time where you know it's special at that moment, like you were saying before. You know, you'd see the Who this week, but every once in a while, something like Hendrix or this marquee show where you're just like, I knew it was something when I was there.
Oh yeah. There are certain things, even picture-wise, that, you know, I don't think I gave it to T-Rex on stage. There's certain moments that you just know you've got it. And there's so many other times when you don't have a clue. You know, when you're dealing with analog film, you just keep your fingers crossed until it comes out of the dark room and you're, yes, you know.
That's amazing. What made you, you know, you've been taking pictures ever since, but at some point you switched from music to movie. What was the, it seems natural in a way, it's artist, but it also seems crazy.
Oh, the music changed. That was
okay.
By far. When you were used to doing the level of this bands, these, you know, Crosby, Stills and Nash, The Doors, Jefferson Airplane, when you're used to doing all these incredible bands, and then the punk scene came around, that didn't do anything for me, you know. And I did a few gigs, and after surviving the smosh pit, or whatever it's called, you know, and these guys spitting on you is like, fuck, I don't want this. So the music changed, and at the same time, I was really interested in movie people, and any chance I got to shoot. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. lived in London, so I spent some time with him. Raymond Burr came over on a visit. Oliver Reed on a film set. Anytime I got a chance to shoot on a movie set, I did. So to me, the natural progression was, you know, I had a girlfriend from California, and I was going backwards and forwards. And to me, it was like Hollywood is going to offer more opportunities, because I pretty much done everything I thought there was to do in London. So I done the reams of album covers, and posters. You know, you see your picture on the side of a bus. Great, okay. So, but done everything. And the only way to try and break into movies, you're known as a music photographer. So when you say, look, so-and-so, Dustin Hoffman's doing a movie and I want to shoot it. And, well, you're music, aren't you? Yeah. How could you shoot film? TV? Really? So so to me, the only way to break that barrier and was to put everything in a box, close the door on it, and move to Hollywood. And it was just going to be so easy. Move to Hollywood, and it's like, yeah. So that was an interesting, from being a big fish in a small pool to being nothing. So that was quite a change to get used to.
Right, but you know, I guess it worked out. You're still here.
It did. I got, again, incredibly lucky. Working on almost straight away with TV show Starsky and Hutch. You remember that one?
Yeah.
So David Soul and I connected. He was really into music. He took me on his tour when he went back to England. His first movie, and just, as this young kid with, with no training, with no nothing except the balls to get out there and do it, to be sitting in Gregory Peck's home in Beverly Hills, to be spending a day with Glenn Ford, at Rod Steiger's house in Malibu. I pinch myself,
Right.
thinking, this is really, so I got very lucky. So I went from the music to the film TV.
That's amazing. The as a quick aside, I was a huge Rod Steiger fan. What was he like?
He was quite something quite intimidating. Again,
really?
because I grew up as a kid. Glenn Ford, I saw all the movies. So to me, Steiger was this, wasn't it Patton? Was that Steiger?
No, that was George C. Scott.
George C. Scott.
Paul Broker and
Paul Broker. Okay. So to me, I don't know. I was very intimidated in a way that I wasn't with rock and roll stars, because this was way out of my depth. I'm living in London. I'm a young kid. These are young guys. So now I'm this, fish out of water, and I'm sort of in, to get access to these people was like, and I think he was with a young wife. I vaguely remember he had been a colorful career with women, didn't he, with divorces or something?
yeah, I think a few times. He battled depression a little bit too, so I think he kind of ebbed and flowed in his life a little bit.
Yeah. So, but again, just to be in their homes, I mean, that's quite something. You can shoot these people in hotels and stuff like that, but to actually spend time, and I mean, Gregory Peck was just, what was going to be a 1 hour shoot turned into like 4 hours with his assistant coming in, Mr. Peck, you've got to, hang on. I mean, just magical. Just magic.
That's amazing. It's funny that you say that it was a bigger deal for you with the Hollywood thing at first. And it kind of makes sense when I'm thinking about it, because when you're at a show and you're backstage, you're meeting them as people and you're watching them interact as people. But for your whole life before you moved to Hollywood, you only ever saw Gregory Peck on the big screen, right? So it was like a 30 feet tall image of what Hollywood was, not what he was.
Exactly. And it took some doing. It took me a good few years. And David Soul was great. But it took a good few years to be able to relax and get these people. I'm sitting with Glenn Ford saying, okay, I need you to stand by the door. Okay, can you look this way now? Sit on the chair over there. Put your hand on. I'm directing Glenn Ford or Gregory Peck or whatever to get the picture I want. So it's like you're driving away from that thinking, ooh. So, and all photographers do this. It's not, you're there to get the picture that you have in your mind. So these people need to be, moved around, directed. So
right.
Well, that was always something that stuck in my mind.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, look, you've lived quite a life and you continue to do it. So I appreciate you taking the time and coming by Rock Tales and chatting with us, because I could listen to you all day long. I mean, you lived in the world that I love. Yeah, we'll have to do part 2. But now that Peter Grant's gone, maybe we can reconnect with Robert Plant and Jimmy Page and get them in a shoot one day. But yeah, man, look, I really do appreciate it. Great stories, great photos. Where can people, like I have behind me, photos I love, and where can people find your stuff if they're interested?
That would be great. If it's Alec Byrne archive.com. And we do have an Instagram, which I'm hoping I can pop up there some way. But with the website, though, we'll give you access to and show you a lot of stuff that we've done. But I mean, by no means, there's so many bands that
Right.
didn't make the book, don't make limited editions, don't mean a great deal in the US. Slade, Status Quo, Kinks, so many, hundreds of bands I photographed that are not included and not up on the website. So if you don't see it, ask. We might have it.
Perfect, because there's a lot. Look, you just named a bunch of artists. I'm like, I would like to see those pictures. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. But thank you. Cheers to you. I appreciate you being here, and and thank you to Drew for finding your lost photos and bringing them out to the world.
Without Drew, we wouldn't be speaking, and his insight into getting this out and sharing it, I am ever so grateful, and a big thank you to him. And I, maybe at a later date we can do another one of these. I wish you success with it.
Thank you very much.
I will keep in touch with you.
Perfect.
Time for a special Rock Tales cocktail with bartender Michael Neff.
All right. Well, Michael Neff, welcome to Rock Tales. We're excited to have you all the way from Houston, Texas, right?
Right.
And here we are live in cyberspace. So Michael Neff is a good friend of mine, and he's a, very well loved in the bar and cocktail industry. And we met years and years ago, and right, we had a mandate that lasted 10 hours, 12 hours. And ended at
it was in New Orleans, right? And every year we go in the same time. I got to tell you, man, I missed you in July. I missed being in New Orleans in July and hanging out in the chart room with you.
Yeah, man. It's of the things to miss during this year, that is definitely one of them. And it's, now it's been 5 or 6 years, and I don't want to have to go another year like that.
That's yet another thing to chalk up to COVID-19.
True. Well, the good news is we have you here right now, and I've seen you play live. I've seen you play music live on a stage in LA.
Yeah.
Good times. So I know music's in your bones a little bit. Random question, man. Do you remember the first album you ever owned?
The first album I ever owned was probably not an album. It was probably a tape.
I don't buy that. Don't buy it.
That I owned personally? Because there were my parents had.
No, yours. Like, whether they bought it for you or you bought it for yourself, like that first one that was yours, not from their collection.
No, the first one I owned would have been a tape. I would have bought it myself, because my folks would not have bought music for me. And it probably was, there used to be a thing called Columbia House and BMI, where you could send them a penny and they would send you a bunch of stuff, and you'd never pay for it. And then after a while they stopped coming after you, you'd do it again. So I think the first tape I ever actually owned of my own was Adamant, Kings of the Wild Frontiers. It would have been Adam and the Ants, Kings of the Wild Frontier.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah, that's a pretty epic answer.
Very 80s for you.
I like it. It's a good one. Now, you're going to make us a drink. We need a nightcap, and you're going to make us something. Can you tell us a little bit about this drink? Is it inspired by anything, or is it just something that you came up with on your genius brain?
Well, I wanted to do something kind of nightcappy and whiskey-like, and, I've been thinking a lot about Manhattans lately, so this is a light derivation of that. As you know, being a longtime bartender yourself, inventing brand new things is pretty rare, so mostly what we do is stand on the shoulders of giants, and a lot of the game is to just kind of figure out, what tastes good together. And so I was thinking, I've been playing around with what I call a split base. So I use rye whiskey and bourbon whiskey at the same time. So I'm going to use Jack Rye. I'm going to use Woodford Reserve bourbon, a little bit of dry vermouth. So it would be a dry Manhattan, and then a tiny little bit of a bitter called Cynar. And then a little bit of Angostura bitters too. So if that's basically the nightcap I wanted to drink when I was thinking about what I was going to make for you. So that's what I did.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, here we go. So, you know, we talk a lot about tools when we make drinks, and sometimes it's just there to make us feel better about what we're doing. But when you're talking about measuring, you know, you don't have to have fancy things. I just like to use, this is a little 1 ounce glass, which is perfect for me. So I got 1 ounce of the bourbon. This is a Jack rye, which isn't a super traditional rye. It's a little kind of, I think, easier than what you get from a spicy rye, but I like it quite a bit. So a straight up regular normal Manhattan would be, as you know, with sweet vermouth. I like this one with a little bit of dry, so I'm going to do a little more than half an ounce in there. And then just to kind of make it interesting, I'm going to put in a tiny little bit of the Cynar, so maybe just over a quarter. And Angostura Bitters, because I'm such a bitters fiend. So we're going to stir that up. And as people are watching or listening or however we're going to do this, the important thing about this drink is it's very cold. So even to the extent of this chilling glass that I've had here for the last 10 minutes or so. So if you're going to make it at home or any kind of stirred drink at home, you know, martini Manhattan, cold Manhattan is a great Manhattan. That's just how it goes. So I'm going to stir this until the vessel gets pretty cold, and while it's waiting, I'm going to cut a twist. And again, if you're out in the world of mixology and you see someone just twisting their twist like kind of over here, they're not really doing it right. Its purpose is to get these nice oils on top of this cocktail. So I'm going to put this over here on the side.
Now, while you're stirring, I want you to think about the song that you wish was playing while we cheers this cocktail and have a drink together.
You know, I have it. I have it.
You have it already?
I got it. I think I know where all my tools are at one point. Okay, so it's nice and cold right now, super stirred. I'm going to pour it right here into this glass. Beautiful. And then I'm going to take this twist here on the yellow side. I'm just going to twist it across the top, like squeeze it between my fingers. And you see that great orange oil just floats on the top of that cocktail. And this is our nightcap.
Nice.
And I'll tell you, what I wish was playing right now, just because this has been going through my head kind of all day, and I don't know why, it's Without You by The Cure, which kind of brings me back to the conversation we had about being in New Orleans. So there you go.
Nice. Well, you really can't go wrong with The Cure. So, and the 80s either. So cheers.
Cheers to you. Thanks for letting me make my own cocktail. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I could do that. I love Manhattans. Using the dry vermouth is kind of like a nice, recognizable thing. It doesn't make it quite as sweet, which, I mean, it should be in the words, right? But, yeah, that's a nice drink.
Nice. Good work. Do you have a name for it?
No, sir. I can name it if you want. I'm going to call it Just Walk Away.
Just Walk Away. All right.
Just Walk Away.
Perfect. Love it. I think more people should have that playing in their head sometimes when they're out of bars.
Right.
That mantra, just walk away. But hey, man, we appreciate you coming on Rocktails and making us a drink. And, you know, I wish I could see you in person and give you a big hug, but I'll settle for this for now.
Yeah, pretty soon. Thank you so much for having me, man. And, you know, I wish all of you luck. I think it's a great idea, and I can't wait to hear it myself.
Sounds good.
Cheers.
Thank you, Michael Neff. Until next time, be well, be kind, rock on.